Now, let me move over here and I'll tell you about the quest. Oh, and the reason for this, I feel a little uncomfortable about wearing these robes. It's not theatrical. The Black Robes Regiment was considered by the British to be one of the most powerful forces in the American Revolution. And those were the pastors. See, back then we had courageous pastors all over the place, like Dr. Drake. And they urged their congregations from the pulpit to join in the cause of liberty. And that's why the British burned down so many churches. But that's why we have great historical figures like Pastor Muhlenberg, who went off and fought. He wasn't a chaplain. He was a trigger puller. He was the commander of assault units. So in honor of them and to kind of ally with them and also to point everybody's attention at what they did and what we need to do now, I wear these black robes to honor that. So not being theatrical. Okay, let's explain what's going on here. It's very important for us to make sure that our meetings and our actions are always relevant. And I know sometimes there's that question in church services, are they always relevant? You know, what can I take out the door and use? So one of the things we want to do on a weekly basis is deal with a question, a major issue of the day, and offer something new for you to think about or a new way of solving a problem. And so that's what this is about. We'll have different numbers of people up here from time to time, and we'll have this little roundtable discussion. Well, tonight we've got two other members of the American Christian Patriot Church who have been working very hard to put this together. Dave Henderson and Tony Berg. Would you please thank them? And they're going to join this discussion. Very, very literate guys. They're the ones who should be given this information, not me, because they're a whole lot better than I am. But I just look better in black. So anyway, and of course, joining us tonight, Dr. Wiley Drake. You'll see here, one of his nicknames is the Pistol Packin' Pastor. So I'm not going to even ask him if he's carrying tonight. You know, if he's strapped, you know, we won't put him on the spot. But in any event, I feel very safe up here. Let's just say that. So we have an issue here that kind of relates to that. So let me tell you what that is. I'll tee it up, and then we'll start the discussion here. You know that we're not safe. We talked about that. We're not safe for a variety of reasons. And among other things, we see here domestically that violent crime is on the increase. We see that Islamic terrorism is on the increase. Where we are meeting tonight is literally less than 5 miles from where the massacre took place on December 2nd. We're here in San Bernardino, California. So this is very real to us. We're less than 5 miles away from that spot. So we're not very safe. And there's been a lot of debates about what we should do. And a lot of people in the administration and elsewhere said, well, let's take away more guns. Well, you know, if you obey the law, that might work. But you know what? Criminals, by definition, don't obey the law. So I'm not sure how wise that is. But also, that's not the reason for the Second Amendment. But we will get into that maybe some other time. So what do we do about this? Well, a little over a month ago, Dave and I were on a trip to Phoenix to talk to Sheriff Mack of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. He likes what we're doing, and we will be working together with him. And in fact, we're talking about some plans for the future. In fact, some of those things I told you about, I should mention that plan that we have, I wasn't teasing you, it exists. So you can call in 909-913-7878 and call to have me come and explain it to you. If you want to get a head start, there's a book, AR2 Handbook for the Second American Revolution. It details the whole plan, and even aspects we haven't even talked about. It's all right there. So this does exist. It's been vetted by constitutional attorneys, and they've all basically said the same thing, which amounts to, whoa, hadn't thought of that, but that'll work. You bet it'll work. So yes, the plan is real. We'll be unfolding it here in these meetings over time, but if you want to get a jump start, in fact, go to our website, go to, I think it says bookstore, and then you can click on it, it'll take you right to Amazon, and you can just get it that easy. Or we've got a few copies here. But Dave and I were on the way to talk to Sheriff Mack. And on the way there, Dave mentioned something. He'd been doing a little research, and he came up with an idea that I thought, well, I'm going to tip my hand, but I thought it was brilliant. And I said, Dave, I would like to have us cover this in the first quest. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave now and let him tell you what this great idea is.
Forgive me if my voice cracks. I'm on the tail end of a cold. Well, the primary concept is the idea of eliminating guns from society is absolutely ludicrous. First of all, there are over 300 million guns in our country. You think there's only 300 million people, so there's basically one gun per every individual that we have in this country. Over the last year, in fact, jokingly, the NRA says that President Obama should be given the Gun Salesman of the Year award because over 24 million instant background checks were ran last year alone for the purchase of firearms. Of course, we don't know how many were denied, but that's a pretty big number. In that, also, if you sit back and you look at how do we make our society safe? First of all, we have among us in our society 24.8 million veterans. Think about that for a second. 24.8 million veterans who have been trained by the government, not only in handling weapons, but to be disciplined and skilled in the art of handling weapons. Why does it take a packet of paperwork this thick to apply for a concealed weapons permit when you have been through the training and by the very nature of having a veteran's ID card, you show that you have the training. They are probably, veterans among us are probably some of the most reliable people that we have in our society. Now, true, some veterans have fallen after their service, fallen by the wayside and have done some bad things. So let me ask you, right now, if you go purchase a weapon in our state, anywhere in the country, you have to go through this background check. Background check exposes that you have no criminal record. If you have one of these, you have the training. So why does a veteran have to go through a year-long process, a half-inch thick packet of paper, to prove that you're a reliable individual? I served over a decade in the military. I went through a top-secret background clearance with a special background, TSSBI is what they call it. I don't feel, first of all, that I should have to go through that process to prove that I'm worthy of a right that the Constitution gives me. It guarantees me that right. Actually, let me rephrase that. The Constitution doesn't give me that right. I was born with that right.
Right.
It's an inalienable right that came with my humanity. God gave me that right. The government didn't give me that right. The Constitution says that I have that right, and the government cannot infringe upon that right. So why do I have to go through a year-long process to carry a concealed weapon? I'll argue that the Constitution is my concealed weapons permit, and the fact that we have to go through this process at all is blatantly unconstitutional, and I can argue that frontwards, backwards, and use the Constitution to prove it. So that's basically in a nutshell. Overnight, we could put 24.8, subtract a few, subtract a million if you want to be a little on the aggressive side, skilled, trained individuals on the street to protect us overnight. We want to stop terrorism. We have to have somebody to stand in the breach in front of them. If you look at the theory and the thinking behind the militia, who is the militia? It is every one of us in this room. The Second Amendment states that militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Nowhere in the Constitution is the word infringed used, except in the Second Amendment. Why? Because the founders knew that that was the stopgap of tyranny. It has nothing to do with hunting. It has nothing to do with putting food on the table. It has nothing to do with punching holes in papers on Saturdays at the range. That's fun. I enjoy doing it. But it's about protecting our families.
That's right. Amen.
Both foreign and domestic.
And domestic.
Amen.
So that's the conversation we had in a nutshell.
So the proposal then is this. We're going to recommend that the federal government pass legislation to fast-track veterans who are honorably discharged and who have a record that shows that they are not guilty of any violent crimes and they're not crazy. To fast-track a nationwide concealed carry permit that will be good all across the nation, regardless of the states. So you have a place like California? No. I mean, this is our constitutional right anyway. What's going on in California is unconstitutional. Here's a good way to override this. But that's the idea in a nutshell. So they would pass national legislation for a national concealed carry permit, make it very easy. Basically, a veteran applies. They do a quick background check, show he's not crazy and he's not violent and he had an honorable discharge. You got it. You know, maybe 2-3 weeks later. Now you can carry, and now we've got millions of basically deputies all over the country, and the bad guys don't know they might be sitting right next to one who's packing and who knows what to do with it. Okay? And then there could even be a second level too. If you wanted to get a little more aggressive, maybe go through a little training and actually be deputized or something like that and get a little stipend to allow you to join a range and pay for a little ammunition to keep your skills up. That could be a second tier, but that's the basic idea. So I'm going to ask Dr. Drake, first of all, what he thinks of this and what he'd like to add to it, and then we'll ask Tony for his thoughts. So Dr. Drake.
I think it's a great idea, and the reason I think it's a great idea is because I went through a situation where I decided that to protect my family and my church that I should have a concealed weapons permit, and I applied for it. I had no background problems, nothing that they could bring up, but they just never got around to granting it. And that happens all the time. So I said, I'm either going to carry illegally or I'm going to carry legally. So I went down to a guard company and got a security guard card. And a part of being a security guard is that you can also get another card that qualifies you to carry a weapon. And so I circumvented the system, really. I have a guard card and I have a permit to carry a weapon. That's why I'm called a pistol-packing preacher. Because I do. And I'll give you another example. You're talking about the Secret Service and the IRS. When a few years ago, I said we needed to pray imprecatory prayer against our president, Barry Soetoro. Most of you know him as Barack Hussein Obama. That's not his name. That was his taken name. His given name is Barry Soetoro. And I said we were going to pray as a church and individuals imprecatory prayer. That means to pray Psalms 109, where it says, may his children become fatherless, may his wife become a widow. I didn't write that. God did. The Secret Service showed up at my front door. Are you Wiley Drake? I said, yes, I am. Good morning. How can I pray for you? And they said, and they showed their badges and said, oh, I'm agent so-and-so, and I'm agent so-and-so. And I said, fine. We want to talk to you. I said, not without an attorney. And one of the guys decided to be the bad cop of the group. Bad cop, good cop, you know. Secret Service flew out here all the way from Washington, D.C. to talk to me. And he walked right up to the door and said, we need to talk to you. And he pushed his coat back, revealing his sidearm. And so I bellied up to the door, pushed my coat back, revealing my sidearm. And I said, I told you I'm not talking to you without an attorney. And so he said, is that a .357? I said, yes. Is that a .38? And that's how I got the reputation, because the Secret Service in Washington, D.C., every time I would go there for a tour of the White House, they would say, that's the guy who pulled the gun on the Secret Service. And I said, that's a lie. I never touched my gun. All I did was scoot my coat back to reveal the presence there. So I think it's absolutely fantastic idea to give our veterans who are already qualified and certified to be the possession of a concealed weapons permit, because it makes a few people nervous if you carry it open. And but I'm willing, I think, and we're going to do everything we can to help, but we need to get this done if we could, because we need to protect ourselves. And I'll close that little portion saying this. I'm sort of a history buff, and because I spent some time in Vietnam, I also spent some time in Japan. And I learned a few words of Japanese on how to order food. But when I was in Japan, I was following the history, and I read a story one time of Hirohito. He was the man who was in charge of Japan when they attacked us. And a strategist said to him, "Emperor, why did you not go on from Pearl Harbor to the mainland and take America?" And he said, "Because our investigators told us that every American had a weapon, and we didn't dare attack them on the mainland. We could surprise a ship, but you're not going to surprise people who have a weapon in their home." And so he said, that's why we didn't attack the rest of America, because every American we know has a weapon. And so that tells us exactly how important it is. And I'm all for...
Texas is armed. Texas. They're carrying their weapons.
And they're,
Arigato.
that's it. You gotta love them, right? Huh? Okay. Thank you for all you've done and are doing. Okay, Tony, what are your thoughts on this?
Favorite subject. So this was just sprung on me not long ago, and Lawrence and I were talking about it. And initially, I thought, what a great idea. And I have to admit, I still think it's a good idea. I'm a little bit more pessimistic about some of the aspects, but only because of Dave's initial statement. Why do we have to ask for permission? Why do we have to have a nationwide CCW?
I agree.
There are, the majority of the states in this, there's a difference in legal language when it comes to issuing gun permits. And that is, in the industry, known as a shall issue state or a may issue state. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but essentially what that means in legal language is a shall issue state is required upon your petition to ask for a gun permit, a concealed weapons permit is what we're talking about, to give it to you unless there's some precluding problem, maybe a mental disease, maybe a particular crime that precludes you from owning a weapon, a bad conduct discharge from the military, or dishonorable duty of some form. A may issue state is what a few liberal states are, New York, Connecticut, California. And a may issue state basically gives the authority to the sheriff to say, you can ask for a gun permit, but we're going to deny it unless we feel that you need it. And so this is what Dr. Drake came across. He came across the may issue hurdle because in my line of work as a private investigator and a bondsman, I've been carrying a gun for the last 20 years since I got out of the Marine Corps. But you're given, Semper Fi, but you are given, there's always a jarhead in the group somewhere. California will issue with very limited provisions or instructions. They will say to you, you're a bondsman. You may carry only in the course of your duties, or you are a private investigator and you can carry it only while working, or you are an owner of a small business in a high crime area and you can only carry it when you're making large cash deposits at banks after dark. So they're really quick to say no and very tight on issuing the weapon permit. But mind you, Arizona's a constitutional carry state. There are states that are shall issue and may issue. Well, I left something out. There's also a constitutional state. The constitutional state says, unless you're a felon, have a gun. In fact, everyone should have one. And you can carry it concealed, open, anything you want to do. And I don't know about you guys, but coming from California where we're so anti-gun, having carried a gun all my days, I went to Arizona and I saw two young men walk into a Circle K with pistols exposed, loaded, magazines in them. My first reaction is, oh no, I'm not armed. I can't fight back, a gunfight without a gun. And I realized that this was the culture and nature of not only Arizona, but the vast majority of states in our nation. So there's been an ongoing nationwide debate about crime stats, whether armed societies have less crime or more crime, and they're always playing with the numbers. And it seems that the left, in my opinion, skews those numbers a little more than the right, but that's just my opinion. You will find that everyone in Arizona is a whole lot more polite than they are here, and that's my personal experience. So when we're talking about everybody being armed, you know, the police officers did this a few years back. I think it was 2008, HR 218, which was the Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act, allowed law enforcement officers that were either honorably retired, medically retired, or active duty police officers, people that held peace officer status and made lawful arrests in their state, they were able to have a nationwide concealed weapons permit. So why can't the veterans? It's a shame that we have to ask.
Yeah.
And in most states, it's not even an issue. But it would be nice if we had the authority of Congress saying, hey, we're going to pass this piece of legislation, and we are going to recognize the training and so on and so forth, and we'll issue these permits to those that are otherwise not disqualified. And then if there's a second tier to that, where there's some kind of deputization or citizen force that can also be our home protectors, I'm for that too. We all should have that responsibility, but I wouldn't be against it, because it's a step in, just like we have been formed over years now into believing certain things. For instance, the separation of church and state and the way that we've come to know it, but not that it was really intended. Well, the same formations have been happening since we were all young. You know, anyone in school about, you know, how we feel about guns and gun safety and guns equal death. And if we can pass legislation like this, we can start to get people to realize that maybe there were some fallacies to that whole concept, and that guns are not necessarily bad. It's the people behind the gun that is bad. So if somebody runs someone over in a Ford tomorrow, are we going to outlaw all the Fords? It just doesn't make sense. It's not rational. If somebody wants to kill you, they're going to kill you with a spoon, a knife, a car, something. So I think in our inalienable rights for life, liberty, these sorts of things, right? You know,
Amen.
Doesn't that include the use of force to protect your life or somebody else's life?
Amen.
I happen to subscribe to that concept. So I'm all for it. Where I'm a pessimist about it is that I think that there's not a need to have that second layer. I just say citizens that should lawfully be able to carry. And I think that everyone that carries has to be trained. I will tell you, I already know that Dr. Drake has to shoot his gun at a range 2 times every year. 4 times in a 2-year cycle until that permit expires. I know I have the same permit too. You have to shoot. I think that there's some very basic training needs that can be met, and that the citizens can take on themselves to keep this status up. And if there's a way to formulate that second layer, that's great. To me, it's too convoluted to really wrap my mind around that. So that's my opinion. And by the way, I happen to look up some stats, and I don't know what's accurate, but I saw 28.1 million veterans based on the veterans numbers. And I don't know how accurate that is, but then I looked at the discharge types. You know, you have your honorable, your general, your bad conduct, your dishonorable. And out of about 500,000 veterans a year that exit the military, 449,000 are honorable. General discharge is not considered a punitive discharge. About 40,000 were punitive. And then you had your other than honorable, which was more punitive, and that was even a smaller number, like 19 or 15,000. And then dishonorable was like 6,000 veterans. So you're talking out of 500,000, 6,000 have been kicked out. So there is a big pull to arm. And I think that having such a big pool of qualified people, those that are mentally sound, that are trained, not only could they be armed, but why don't we harness that and use that to train the citizens or the militias, if you will.
Amen. Amen.
And that's one of the things that came out in our conversation with Sheriff Mack. He is preparing now a program to start training citizens, to train other citizens. And in fact, one of the things that we have in the hopper that we'll be talking about down the road is kind of, in a nutshell, sort of like Neighborhood Watch on steroids. And it will be involved so that you can keep safe when you know the government is failing to do it. Okay? But we'll be talking about that more. Now, we do want to wrap up here pretty quickly, but I want to give you an opportunity. So we take about 5 minutes if you have some questions, and we'll try to answer them very quickly. One of the things here, too, just so you know, in case you got the feeling, certain feeling here, and about a warrior organization, I'll just say, Dave, United States Army Ranger. Tony, United States Marine Corps. Dr. Drake, United States Navy, right?
Yep.
Hoorah. United States Marine Corps. So we got some warriors here, and we know there are a lot more out there. Okay, question. Yes. Oh, sorry.
You know me as a strict constitutionalist, and I can see two definite kind of opposing viewpoints on all of this. I think there is a legitimacy to the concept that since the U.S. military is just that, the U.S. military, that if the United States chooses to do that with their veterans, that would be a legitimate thing to do. The other side of me says, the states existed before the federal government ever did, and the concept of rights, unalienable rights, existed even before the states did. And so the point is that the right to keep and bear arms is in the U.S. Constitution. If that was there, as everything else is in the U.S. Constitution, to keep the, quote, new federal government from abusing the God-given rights that we already had that were protected at the state level. Now, California, right now, is an exception. In California's state constitution, the last time I checked, we do not have an equivalent to the Second Amendment. However, in every other state constitution, we are guaranteed the right to keep and bear arms. Like I say, California, unfortunately, is an exception to that. My point is that the founders wisely left the issue of guns and gun ownership to the states, like they left education and other matters to the states. And I'm a little concerned that we put more power in the hands of the federal government for a good purpose. Please don't get me wrong. I completely understand what you're saying. I think at the heart it's a good idea. But I'm always a little bit, more than a little bit, concerned when we hand still more power of making decisions and allowing things or disallowing things to the central government. Our founders had a real problem with that. And I think a good example of that concept was found a number of years ago, I think probably 27 or 28 years ago in the state of California. There was an initiative on the ballot. This was at a time when they were beginning to be concerned about anti-smoking laws for health reasons and such, and they were beginning to pass laws locally, at the local level, governing smoking in public places for the benefit of protecting the health of other people who were there who were non-smokers, like restaurants and so forth. Well, there was a bill that appeared on the state, as a state initiative. It was going to allegedly put tough new anti-smoking rules in the hands of Sacramento, so that we didn't have this hodgepodge of local, smoking, anti-smoking ordinances. We wanted to make tough new laws in the hands of the Sacramento people. And one of the major sponsors of that was the tobacco companies. And a thinking person would ask, why would the tobacco companies be behind a measure to put new teeth into tough new anti-smoking laws at a higher level, the state level? And the answer is quite simple, and it's the same process, the same thought process that applies here, only in spades. Of course, they wanted everybody to smoke, but they were financing this not because they were trying to pass new stuff to smoking laws. What they were trying to do is place control at a centralized higher level where they could then control it. And in the future, obviously, loosen those quote, tough new smoking laws. the distribution of lawmaking power close to the people is a fundamental concept of Americanism. And I would be a little concerned about it from that standpoint. It's not a federal issue, strictly speaking. The Second Amendment is in the Constitution just to make sure the federal government didn't abuse the right that the people already held from the beginning and that the states were already there to protect. Again, the present California is an exception. I understand that. But it wasn't always that way. That would be my concern.
And I'll try to briefly summarize because we didn't have a microphone over there, and for those who are watching on the internet, the argument was that sounds like a good idea, but he does have a concern that maybe the federal government is starting to override the states, and as you know in the Constitution, especially in the Bill of Rights, right at the end, it's talking about where rights are embodied and who can, what your rights are and what they aren't, and who can supersede whom and whatever. The idea is that he's a little bit concerned that the federal government might be overriding the states if this was the state's will. I think my quick response to that would be, I agree with that sentiment entirely. I think the concentration of power in fewer and fewer places is profoundly dangerous. But the workings of this particular idea is actually to reverse what has been going on at the states to take away our Second Amendment rights. That we shouldn't, like Tony was saying, we shouldn't have to go hat in hand and say, oh, mother, may I please be able to carry my gun. No, the Second Amendment says keep and bear. It's about as simple as it can get. Keep means to have, bear means to carry with you. That's it. Shall not be infringed. So one of the things I like about this proposal is it gives us a chance to start chipping away at what they have chipped away at, kind of a reverse chipping, so to speak. So again, we want to keep this fairly brief. I know we had another question over here. How about we take that?
Well, I was just going to ask, what's the next step then as to, you mentioned earlier over here about the Congress. Are you going to be effective in going to the Congress? And do you specifically have a congressman that you can go to that is in alignment with your thought processes and can be effective in presenting this bill and really making it happen? Or are you taking another road?
Well, this is actually, we just popped the cork on this one. So we definitely are interested in pursuing this. And as you'll see as this church develops, this is literally the birthday of the American Christian Patriot Church. You see we're going to grow fast and strong. So yes, we're going to be putting together a specific proposal, and we are going to be getting it out there. And what we're hoping is, as people watch this across the nation and tell their friends, hey, you got to tune into acpcusa.org and look at this and start pestering for it, start writing these letters. We'll have a letter on our website that you can copy and start sending to your congressmen, your senators, and the likes, so that they can start building the momentum for this. Is it going to be easy? No, of course not. Will we even succeed? Maybe not. But the thing is, frankly, we're here to pick some fights. So we're going to pick some fights, and if people are going to resist us, okay, we're going to make you pay the price. We're going to call you out. We're going to show everybody your true colors. And they are not red, white, and blue.
I can make a quick comment on that too. A couple of distinct points. You're absolutely right, and I agree wholeheartedly with Tony. And it highlights one of the really important things why the 10th Amendment is so important, why states' rights are so important. Because we as people, if we are living in a corrupt state, we have the option of moving to another state. We can vote with our feet and move to another state, like Arizona, as an example. So that's why states' rights are so important and why we need to bring the federal government in check. And one of the things that I think is very, very important is for years we have been on the receiving end of all kinds of aggressive action from the left. Amen. And a really good example of this is you look at organizations like the ACLU. You talk about, they're litigious, they file lawsuits, they're after everybody that they can go after. We need the equivalent. We need bulldog attorneys that are willing to go after these issues at the constitutional level.
That's right.
And show that, first of all, the whole process of concealed weapons permit is a denial of your due process. First of all, in our society, our legal system, we are innocent until we are proven guilty of a crime in a court of law in front of a jury and a judge. And until that has happened, they cannot deny you that right. So there's some very distinct things that we've got as a society to start taking to becoming the aggressors. We can't play this as a defensive battle and win. We've got to go after these people, and we got to take them in the legal process every single place we can.
And along those same lines, just to let you know, I'm not going to mention any names yet, it'd probably be unethical because it might be seen as unfair pressuring, but 2 days from today, we're going to be meeting with a senior counsel of a constitutional group to talk about getting together the very type of legal support that Dave was mentioning. We've had preliminary conversations. It has led now to this. We've forwarded some information. On Thursday afternoon at 1 o'clock, we are going to be meeting with one of their senior counsels to talk about getting the same kind of action, and not to just be defensive. We're going on the offense. We're going after some people. The ACLU goes after some people. We're going to go after some people who can do that.
And you know, in reference